exactly how or what to study for tomorrow. So, anything that you guys have as far as the odds on homework number 26, section 4.4? Adam? 91. The very last problem in homework. Is there anything earlier than 91? Robbie? 25. Anything earlier than 25? Okay, then be looking for the problems in between 25 and 91 if you have any questions. Number 25. When it says constraint, is that a snazzy mathematical term that literally only has a special meaning in math? No. What's constraint? Your parents putting constraints on you, hopefully, at least somewhat. Constraints. Restrictions. Does that kind of make sense? Restrictions. You can think of it kind of as rules, conditions that need to be met or that are true. So when it said constraint, don't be confused by that one, even though I understand we didn't really use that term much yesterday. But constraint is more of an English word, just meaning like, oh, hey, it's held back, it's restricted, it's qualified by. Qualified, that's a good like non-mathematical way of saying it. Qualified by, needs to meet the condition of theta lying in quadrant 2. So if it's in quadrant 2, can't I make some arbitrary? Well, actually, I could be kind of specific. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why am I going over 3 and, well, maybe that's not quite true. Why am I going to go, well, that's hard. Yeah, maybe rise over run, but the problem is sine has a very specific ratio. What's sine's ratio? It's not x over y, it's not y over x, it's not opposite over adjacent, it's opposite over. Okay, so here's the tricky part. Just because I know what's going on, I'm going to put the point here. But maybe not all of you guys would have known to go over 4. What? Why am I going over 4? Because the opposite is 3, the hypotenuse is 5. Didn't we memorize in geometry a triangle that's a 3, 4, 5? But here's the dilemma. Doesn't this need to lie in quadrant 2? This won't be a positive 4. It's a negative 4. So if it's a negative 4, now, sorry, Robbie, what are they actually asking for? Oh, find them all. Find them all? Okay, so we already have sine. That's good, but we also want cosine. We also want tangent. I'm not going to do them all, but now that we have the triangle, we can say adjacent, it's going to be negative over hypotenuse. Tangent, we could do opposite over adjacent, which is 3 over negative 4, but it makes the whole 3/4 negative. That's what's going on there. And then just remember, cosecant, I flip reciprocal. Secant, I flip reciprocal. Cotangent, I flip reciprocal. The hardest part was, I think, figuring out that the adjacent, well, that 3 and 5 are opposite in hypotenuse, and then to fill in the adjacent of negative 4, and then sokoto. Okay. Anything before 91, after 25? Thanks, Robbie. Guys, I can't give tons of time waiting for you to have questions, so it's okay. Just be bold, speak up. That's why I give you the Google Classroom, is for my timid ones to have it ready to go, just to shout it out really quick when you come into class, not need to think about it or work up courage. Just let me know if you have something, okay? I'm looking. Use a trig identity to find the indicated value in the specified quadrant. Ooh. A trig identity. Quadrant 3. Wait a minute. Sides aren't positive in quadrant 3. All students take, oh, tangent is. Why is tangent positive in quadrant 3? Aren't the x's negative in quadrant 3 and the y's? But what's tangent's ratio? Opposite over adjacent, so it is a negative over a negative, which makes the positive. If I needed to, I could go ahead and come over here, and I could go ahead and do a squared 4, b squared 9, c squared 13, square root it to get c. I could fill in a triangle, and I could do chosha cow, sha, and I could do hypotenuse over adjacent, and I'd be right. But the directions said use a trig identity, didn't it? Isn't there a trig identity that says tangent squared? Do you guys remember how it goes? Plus 1 equals. Couldn't I? Don't get tricked by the trig notation. Tangent squared of theta really just means, it's a shortcut way of writing tangent of theta squared. It's a shortcut way of writing. Whenever you see this in trig, it's shortcut ways. It's nice notation for what you see here. Tangent equals secant. We could even just call it x if you want. We're trying to find secant theta. We could just make him an unknown and be like, I don't know who he is. Well, wait a minute. That's hard because then I end up with 9/4 plus, couldn't I make that 4/4? So x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 13/4. It doesn't match. It's different. Wait, what's the square root of 4? Oh. Square root of 13 over square root of 4. Square root of 13 over 2. But how did they know to choose the negative? Because it's in the third quadrant. Cosine is negative, so C is negative. Because third quadrant clue, we knew it had to be negative. If they didn't give us this clue, we would have to say plus or minus, I don't know, both, I guess. Depends on where you are. Good question, Robbie. That was a really good question. Anything else besides 91? 63? Ooh, what's the question on this one, Tony? Oh, evaluate. Can I actually make 63 the final question? That leads us into what we're doing today. I'm going to come right back to 63. Anything else besides 63 and 91? Gavin? 20. Okay, we're backtracking a little bit. Try not to do that. But let's get this one, then we'll go to 91, then we'll come back to 63, which will lead us into the rest of today's class. This clue says sine needs to be negative, right? Less than 0. Okay, sine is the y, if that helps, if you're thinking of the circle. Or you could think sine has to do with the opposite side, if that helps, if you're thinking triangles. We'll come back to that in a second. Secant equals -2. Well, wait a minute. You could say, I know secant. Secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. Or you could say, I know secant is the reciprocal of cosine. You could do that also. And you could say adjacent over hypotenuse. These are the exact same thing because, look, hypotenuse goes with -2. Hypotenuse goes with, well, who's the adjacent? There's nobody there. We can always put over 1. So the sign is actually a little extra. The sign is a little extra. We'll figure out what the sign is in a second. This one says hypotenuse is negative. This one says adjacent is negative. But hold on. Let's just try to figure out where this triangle is. Secant, which is built on cosine, has to do with x's, or you can think has to do with adjacents over hypotenuses. Okay. In what quadrants are x's negative, or are the adjacents going to be negative? Yeah, second and third. You can also think all students take calculus. All are positive. Well, not cosine. Or I should say, if all are positive, cosine can't be negative. And if cosine, all students take calculus. If cosine's positive, well, it's not negative. So these two, cosine, are negative. You can also think the x's go to the left. Well, that makes sense. And so I know it's either quadrants 2 or quadrants 3. But wait a minute, there was an extra clue. Besides the cosine being a negative number, putting us in these two quadrants, what's the extra clue? Good, x is negative and y is negative. Well, okay, wouldn't that be third quadrant? Or the adjacent is negative and the opposite is negative? So I could go -1 and then somehow, well, I have to just go like a length of 2, so 1, 2, I guess it's here-ish. Okay, that would have a length of 2 for the hypotenuse, -1 for the adjacent. How can we solve for, I'm guessing all 6, is that what we're doing? Pythagorean theorem. Isn't c squared minus a squared b squared? So 4 minus 1 is 3, so this is going to be root 3. Oh, hey, isn't this one of our special 1, 2, root 3 triangles with a 30 and a 60? Can anybody tell me what radian this is actually at? It's one of our special unit circle ones. We either have the 6th, the 4th, or the 3rd in the the 3rd quadrant. Is it a 6th, a 4th, or a 3rd? It's a 3rd. So a 3rd, how many thirds? Well, I have 1 whole pie, right? 1 whole calzone. That's 3 slices, and how many more? 1 more. 4 pi over 3. Anyway, that's just connecting it to a radian angle. What they're asking for is the trig ratios. And you're like, okay, no big deal. SOHCAHTOA. Sine is going to equal opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is going to equal, I'm just being lazy, right? Tangent is going to equal, technically we should go ahead and put the thetas. And then we know what to do for all the rest is flip and flip and flip for cosecant and secant and cotangent and rationalize